Here's a question that should bother you. If pirate battles were these massive bloody showdowns, why do historical records show most ships captured by pirates had zero casualties? Someone's been lying to you about what really happened on those decks. Pirates spent about 95% of their careers doing absolutely nothing exciting. I know, not exactly what the movies promised you, but here's the thing. Before any sword got drawn, before any cannon fired, pirates had to actually find someone to rob. And that process? Brutally boring. Every pirate ship had a guy perched over 100 feet up on the masthead. His entire job was staring at the horizon for hours. On a clear day, he could spot a ship 12 miles out. That's impressive until you realize he's been up there since sunrise, sunburned, seasick, and probably questioning his life choices. Now spotting a ship was just step one. The captain would grab his spyglass and start analyzing. Smoke patterns told him if the ship was cooking a big meal, meaning large crew. Sail shapes revealed nationality. Hull silhouettes hinted at cargo capacity. This wasn't guesswork. This was forensic accounting from 5 miles away. And here's the detail that changed everything. A fully loaded merchant ship sits lower in the water. An empty one rides high. So pirates weren't just looking for ships, they were looking for heavy ships. Makes sense, right? The really experienced crews could count gun ports through a telescope and estimate exactly how much firepower they'd face. 12 ports? Manageable? 32 ports? Maybe find a different victim. Some pirate crews followed trade routes for weeks, burning through food supplies, waiting for the perfect target. But finding prey was only half the problem. Getting close enough to attack? That required a trick so devious it worked for decades. Here's where pirates got really sneaky. Every pirate ship carried a wardrobe of flags: English, Spanish, Dutch, French, sometimes all 4 at once, stuffed in a chest near the helm. Why? Because flying the wrong flag wasn't illegal at sea. There was no one to check. A pirate captain spotting a Spanish merchant wouldn't raise the Jolly Roger. That would be idiotic. He'd run up a Spanish flag, wave friendly-like, and sail right up alongside. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, grappling hooks were already flying. The real flag came out only at the last second. And that skull and crossbones? It wasn't designed to terrify. Well, not entirely. It was actually a negotiation tool. The Jolly Roger basically said, "Surrender now and nobody dies." It was the pirate equivalent of a strongly worded letter, but a red flag? That was different. Red meant no quarter, no mercy, no survivors. If you saw crimson cloth unfurling above a pirate mast, you either surrendered immediately or prepared to die. There was no third option. Blackbeard understood this game better than anyone. He reportedly sailed with Dutch, Spanish, and English flags ready to deploy depending on who he encountered. The man was basically running a costume shop at sea. The craziest part? This worked for decades. Ships had zero way to verify if a flag was legitimate. Radio didn't exist. Background checks weren't happening. But getting close was only step one. Now the pirates had to actually catch their prey. Here's the thing about chasing down a merchant ship. Pirates almost always won. Not because they were better sailors, because they were lighter. Pirate ships carried nothing. No silk, no sugar, no barrels of rum stacked below deck. They stripped their vessels down to the bare bones. Extra wood panels? Gone. Heavy cannons they didn't need? Tossed overboard. Everything that added weight disappeared. Merchant ships? Stuffed to the ceiling with valuable cargo. That's literally why pirates wanted them. But all that weight meant they moved like your uncle after Thanksgiving dinner. The math was brutal. A chase could last 8 to 12 hours. Pirates gaining inches per minute, just slowly, painfully closing the gap while the merchant captain watched his death crawl closer. Now here's where sailing gets interesting. Pirates always aimed for something called the weather gauge. Basically, they positioned themselves upwind of their target. Why? Because being upwind meant controlling everything. Speed, angle, timing. The prey could only react, never dictate. And the desperation moves? Almost comically useless. Fleeing ships sometimes threw cargo overboard to lighten their load. Sounds smart, right? Pirates would just circle back after the chase and collect the floating merchandise anyway. Free delivery. Caribbean pirates specifically chose shallow draft sloops for their work. These smaller vessels could pursue victims into coastal waters where massive naval warships couldn't follow. It was like watching a sports car chase a semi-truck through narrow alleyways. But catching a ship was only step one. The real question was whether anyone would actually fight. Here's the thing about that first cannon blast. It wasn't meant to kill anyone. Pirates fired across the bow of their target, not at it. That shot was basically a text message in the 1700s saying, "Stop right now or things get ugly." And most captains, they got the message immediately. Smart merchant captains lowered their flags the second they heard that boom. Why? Because pirates had a reputation system. Surrender peacefully, and they'd take your cargo, maybe shake your hand, and sail away. Resist? Well, let's just say the pirates remembered that for the next encounter. The terms they offered were shockingly reasonable. Hand over the goods, nobody dies, you keep your ship, everyone goes home with a story for the grandkids. Pretty generous for guys with skull flags, right? But here's what nobody talks about. Roughly 75% of pirate encounters ended right here. No swords, no blood, no dramatic duels on the deck. Just a loud bang, a white flag, and some cargo changing hands. The entire pirate business model depended on this working. A prolonged battle, that destroyed the very goods they wanted to steal. Silk doesn't survive cannon fire. Rum barrels explode. Spices scatter into the ocean. Pirates weren't romantic warriors. They were businessmen who happened to carry cutlasses. Makes sense, right? But that other 25%, the ships that didn't surrender, the captains who thought they could fight back, that's when things got messy. And the preparation for those 15 minutes of pure chaos was almost ritualistic. Here's where things get real. The gap between ships closed. Maybe 50 feet of open water, and in those final 15 minutes, everything that happened next got decided. First came the grappling hooks, heavy iron claws attached to ropes thick as your wrist. Pirates hurled these across the gap, metal biting into wooden railings, locking both ships together like some deadly embrace. Once those hooks sank in, nobody was leaving. Now the weird part. Sailors started wrapping cloth around their cutlass handles. Why? Because hands get slippery. Seawater, sweat, blood. A sword flying out of your grip mid-fight meant you were dead. Simple as that. Pistols got loaded next, but not normally. Forget single musket balls. Pirates stuffed their guns with multiple balls, scrap metal, bent nails, whatever would shred flesh at close range. Reloading during combat? Basically impossible. You got one shot per weapon. So what did they do? They tied 6, sometimes 8 loaded pistols across their chests with ribbon. Pull, fire, drop, grab the next one. Blackbeard reportedly went into battle looking like a walking ammunition depot, and then there were stink pots, ceramic containers filled with burning sulfur, rotten fish, and wet leather. You throw one of these onto an enemy deck, and suddenly everyone's choking, eyes watering, completely blind. Chemical warfare, 1700 style. The crew split into teams. Rope handlers here, weapon bearers there. A few stayed aboard their own ship because someone had to keep sailing. But preparation only gets you so far. What actually happened when bodies started crossing that gap? Here's the thing about movie sword fights. They last 5, 10, sometimes 15 minutes. 2 guys dancing around, trading witty banter, showing off fancy footwork. Real pirate boarding? 90 seconds. Maybe 2 minutes if things got messy. Your arms would give out after 60 seconds of swinging a heavy cutlass. Trust me, try holding a gallon of milk straight out for 1 minute. Now imagine doing that while someone's trying to kill you. The attackers came over the rail screaming. Defenders jabbed downward with pikes, trying to skewer anyone climbing up. And the noise? Absolutely deafening. Gunshots, metal on metal, men shrieking, wood exploding into splinters, all happening in a space roughly the size of your living room. There's a reason pirates use cutlasses instead of those elegant rapiers you see in movies. Long swords caught on everything. Rigging, masts, low ceiling beams. A cutlass was short, thick, and brutal. You didn't need skill. You needed aggression. And forget that fancy footwork. Bodies pressed so tight together, you could smell what the guy trying to stab you ate for breakfast. No room to dodge, no space to retreat, just chaos. But here's what might surprise you. Most injuries weren't from blades at all. Men slipped on wet decks and cracked their skulls, got trampled by their own crewmates, fell through open hatches. The actual stabbing was almost secondary to the general mayhem. Those 90 seconds decided everything. But what weapons actually worked in that chaos? Let's talk about the tools that actually did the killing. The cutlass gets all the glory in movies, and honestly, it deserves some of it. These blades were thick, heavy, and ugly. No elegance whatsoever. They were designed for one purpose: hacking through anything in your path. Rope, wood, bone. Didn't matter. You didn't need fancy training. Just swing hard and hope for the best. Flintlock pistols, though? Total gamble. Beyond 10 feet, you might as well throw the thing. And here's the kicker. They misfired about 30% of the time in humid Caribbean air. So picture this. You're charging at someone, pull the trigger, and click. Nothing. That's why pirates carried 6 pistols strapped across their chests. Backup plans for your backup plans. Then there's the boarding axe. My personal favorite, if I'm honest. This beautiful multi-tool could chop through a locked cabin door, then immediately cave in a skull. Efficiency, people. But the weirdest weapons? Grenades made from coconuts. I'm serious. Hollowed out, stuffed with gunpowder, fuse sticking out the top. Tropical warfare at its finest. Marlin spikes were another nasty surprise. These pointed metal tools were meant for splicing rope. Innocent enough. But in close quarters, they became 6 inches of stabbing nightmare. Muskets, nearly worthless during boarding. Too long. You'd spend more time getting tangled in rigging than actually shooting anyone. Here's what's funny, though. Having great weapons meant nothing if you couldn't actually use them. And most pirates, they really, really couldn't. Here's the uncomfortable truth about pirate combat skills. They were terrible. The average pirate had absolutely zero formal training. None. Not a single lesson. They learned to fight by actually fighting, which is kind of like learning to swim by getting thrown into shark-infested waters. And here's why that makes sense. Most pirates weren't career criminals. They were former merchant sailors, guys who spent their lives hauling barrels, tying knots, and scrubbing decks. Nobody taught cargo haulers how to fence. That wasn't in the job description. So how did they win? Simple. They cheated. Pirates compensated for mediocre skills with overwhelming numbers. A typical attack meant outnumbering the merchant crew 3-1, sometimes 4-1. Hard to lose when you've got that kind of advantage. But the real weapon? Looking absolutely insane. Intimidation did roughly 80% of the work. Pirates deliberately grew wild beards, wore mismatched, terrifying clothing, screamed like demons during boarding. Some lit fuses in their hair to create smoke halos around their faces. Why? Because actually, being dangerous matters way less than appearing dangerous. A merchant sailor facing one screaming lunatic with smoke pouring from his head isn't thinking about sword technique. He's thinking about surrendering. Now, there were exceptions. Former naval sailors who joined pirate crews, those guys were treated like gold, literally given better shares of loot because they actually knew what they were doing. But here's the thing. Occasionally, pirates picked the wrong target, ships that fought back with trained crews and serious firepower. Those encounters, they got bloody fast. Here's the thing about pirates. They weren't idiots. They kept mental records of which ships would actually fight back. And the East India Company? Those vessels sat right at the top of the absolutely not list. We're talking about merchant ships carrying 30 or more cannons, professional gunners who trained specifically for combat, crews that got bonuses for killing pirates. These floating fortresses could shred a pirate sloop in minutes. But occasionally, greed won over common sense. The results? Catastrophic. Pirates attacking well-defended ships sometimes lost half their crew before anyone even boarded. Half. Gone. Just like that. And the passengers? They fought like demons too, especially slave traders. Why? Because captured pirates could testify in court. Witnesses meant nooses. So these crews had nothing to lose by fighting to the death. Now let me tell you about Blackbeard's final moments. The most feared pirate in the Atlantic died in a battle lasting only 10 minutes. When they examined his body, he had 5 gunshot wounds and 20 sword cuts. 10 minutes. That's barely enough time to microwave a frozen dinner, and he took that much damage. Even a single defender with a swivel gun positioned correctly could kill a dozen attackers before being overwhelmed. 1 person, 12 pirates. Done. This is why smart pirates were incredibly selective. They wanted sheep, not wolves. But surviving a battle was only step one. Because what happened in the first hour afterward, that's where things got genuinely disturbing. Here's the thing about pirate medicine. It was absolutely horrifying. The moment fighting stopped, the screaming started. Wounded pirates didn't see a doctor because there wasn't one. The ship's carpenter handled medical emergencies. Yes, the same guy who fixed broken masts also fixed broken people. His qualifications? He owned a saw. Rum served as anesthesia. A lot of rum. We're talking half a bottle minimum before anyone started cutting. And cutting happened frequently because infection killed more pirates than swords ever did. But the wounded had to wait their turn. First priority? Interrogating captured officers. This sounds cruel, and honestly, it was. Pirates didn't torture people for entertainment. They needed information. Where's the hidden cargo? What compartment has the valuables? Merchant captains often concealed their best goods behind false walls. A little persuasion revealed these secrets remarkably fast. Meanwhile, crews voted on what to do with the captured ship. Sink it? Burn it? Keep it? This decision happened immediately, sometimes while blood still pooled on the deck. Then came the talent hunt. Surgeons, carpenters, and navigators didn't get a choice about their future. Pirates pressed these skilled workers into service whether they liked it or not. Common sailors, though, they received an invitation. Join us or go free. Roughly 25% said yes voluntarily. Every single weapon, barrel of gunpowder, and sack of food got transferred to the pirate ship instantly. Notice what wasn't mentioned? Gold, treasure, the stuff everyone associates with pirates. That reveals something fascinating about what they actually valued. Now here's where pirates were weirdly ahead of their time. Before any voyage, crews sat down and signed formal contracts called articles, written rules, clear terms. Every single person knew exactly what they'd earn before the anchor lifted. And the split? Shockingly fair. A regular sailor got 1 share. The captain? Only 1.5 to 2 shares. Compare that to the British Navy, where officers hoarded most of the prize money while common sailors got scraps. Pirates looked at that system and said, absolutely not. But wait, it gets better. These guys invented workers' compensation. Lost a leg during battle? 600 pieces of 8. Lost an arm? Same payout? Lost an eye? Standardized payment. This was the 1700s, mind you. Most governments didn't offer anything remotely similar until centuries later. My favorite part? Disagreements over loot went to a vote. The crew decided, and captains who tried skimming off the top, they got voted out immediately, sometimes thrown overboard. Democracy at its finest, really. The quartermaster acted like an elected union rep. He distributed shares, settled disputes, and made sure nobody got cheated. He could even overrule the captain on non-combat matters. These illiterate criminals running around the Caribbean had created a more progressive economic system than any European government of that era. Wild, right? But here's the thing about having all that treasure fairly divided among your crew. You still needed somewhere to actually spend it without getting arrested, so you've just robbed a ship. Now what? Here's where pirates proved they weren't just thugs with swords. They were escape artists with business degrees. First move? Head for shallow water. Pirate sloops drew maybe 8 feet. Navy warships, 20 feet or more. Those hidden coves and mangrove inlets became invisible highways. The Navy knew pirates were somewhere in there. They just couldn't follow without ripping their hulls open on sandbars. And the weird part is how fast stolen goods became legitimate merchandise. We're talking days, not weeks. Nassau, Port Royal, Charleston. These ports had merchants who asked 0 questions and paid decent prices. Everyone won except the original owners. But what about the stolen ship itself? Easy fix, new paint, new name, forged papers from a bribed official. That captured merchant vessel, the Mary Elizabeth, becomes the Happy Trader by Thursday. My grandfather ran a used car lot. Same energy, honestly. The bribes were practically standardized. 10% to port officials was the going rate, not random corruption, organized corruption. These officials had families to feed, and pirates had goods to fence. Business is business. Then the crew would scatter completely. 30 pirates walking off together screams, "Arrest us!" 30 individuals drifting into different taverns over several weeks, just sailors between jobs. The average successful pirate career lasted only 2 to 3 years. Not because they got caught, because they got smart, took their money, and disappeared into normal life. Which raises a question. How many pirates actually got away with it forever?